While we're waiting, do we have some volunteers for the roles? We have Meno and Socrates and Anytus or Anytus, however you want to pronounce it, is fine. So who would like to be Socrates? Male or female? We're not, we are good feminists all.
Of course, I'm compromised because I don't have the translation that everybody else does. I have Jowett's 1909 version.
Oh boy, you're way out of date.
I know. But it was on the bookshelf. It was my wife's college text.
Okay. Okay, there's Eva. Hello, Eva.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good to have you here. So we're just trying to get some volunteers for the parts of Socrates and Meno and Anytus. I had to look up Anytus. I've been all these years pronouncing it Anytus, and then I looked up and it's pronounced Anytus. Usually the Greek names are pronounced on the third to last syllable. So you can always
We're going to do math again?
you can always take as an example Socrates.
Okay.
So it's Thucydides, Aristoteles, as he was called. So Anytus.
Anytus.
So Paul, there you are. Paul, can you unmute?
Sure.
There you go. Okay, while we're waiting for maybe one or two more, we've got such a big class. Maybe Eva, could you just, you've heard all our introductions.
Yes.
Could you give us a little introduction about why you're taking this course?
I'm taking this course because I have never taken a philosophy course before. My background is more science, math. So in my world, being concise and precise and getting information across in the fewest amount of words is very important. So this has been quite the experience. I'm sitting here at one point, most of it's going over my head, but on the other hand, I'm also saying, why doesn't he just tell him the answer? Why do we have to go through 12 pages of this back and forth, which drives me crazy?
Yeah.
And I guess one thing I can say is Socrates must have had the virtue of patience, for sure, to deal with his students. So yes, that's why I'm here. So I'm probably the least knowledgeable in this group, and I hope you'll excuse my ignorant, stupid questions, and I hope to learn something. I hope to work a different part of my brain than I have been most of my life.
Okay. You are probably the most modest among us. But on the other hand, you're asking for Gorgias, aren't you?
Yes.
You're asking for the lecturer to give you the answer. Paul, can you tell us a little bit about why you're taking this?
Sure. I went to a college where I had an option of not taking math. I could take philosophy instead. So that's what I did. And I've always been fascinated by philosophy. I thought when I was in college I was probably a Platonist rather than an Aristotelian. But as I've gotten older, the more I realize I think that Socrates sometimes can be a bit of a jerk in the way he interrogates his people, and doesn't play by the same rules for himself as he does for others.
Oh, good. Oh, I hope you'll show that to us later on.
Okay.
Yeah. I always found that when I taught Plato, I was a Platonist, and when I taught Aristotle, I was an Aristotelian. All right. Well, we still need our volunteers, somebody to play Socrates. I'm not going to do it.
I wouldn't mind, except for that I think I need to listen more than to read it. That's my hesitation with that.
Well,
You
you could do both, Lucy. I think you'd be a good Socrates.
Oh, well. Let me ask you, when is Socrates in a lot of the text here where there's a big dash, that's him speaking also, correct?
No. He's saying
That's-
something, and then
And
when he's
who's
speaking with Anytus, Anytus is responding.
oh, I would love to be Anytus.
Oh, okay, be Anytus then. So we still need a Meno and a Socrates.
So since I'm the most modest, as you say, and I wasn't here before, I'll volunteer to be Socrates.
Socrates, okay.
All right.
Now we just need a Meno. Paul, was that you raising your hand?
I don't know. I don't have my my text in front of me yet. So hold
Oh,
on.
okay. I thought that was a motion of a hand,
No.
but you were just adjusting.
Yeah.
All right, Meno. We need a Meno. We
I did
can't-
it last time. Surely someone else wants to do it now.
Yeah.
By popular acclaim, you're appointed.
I second that motion.
Okay, Bill is our Meno.
I like the fact, though, that everybody has said that they were either Socratic or Aristotelian or a Platonist.
Platonist, yeah.
Yeah, I was a Dionysian myself.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah,
I'm a Pikian.
college was a lot of fun.
More credit to you, Bill.
I like that.
Okay, well, let's begin on what in Gruba is page 19. And for Ernie and Charlie, it's what is it? 85B, a little bit later than later part of B, 85B, where Socrates begins, what do you think, Meno? Has he in his answers expressed any opinion that was not his own? So, Socrates, let's begin there.
Okay, we're on page. I have the paper version, so it's page 19.
I've got, this is in my old, I've got a very old
Okay.
Meno, but I assumed it was the same in the newer one. Can you look in the margin?
Yes, I see it now. What do you
Okay.
think Meno has? Okay. What
Okay,
do you-
incidentally, let me just interject. Those are called Stephanos numbers. Stephanos numbers, those numbers in the side, from a manuscript by Stephanos, an early collector of the dialogues of Plato. And so all of the translations have the same numbers and letters on the side. Okay, Socrates.
Okay. What do you think, Meno? Has he in his answers expressed any opinion that was not his own?
No, they were all his own.
And yet, as we said a short time ago, he did not know.
That is true.
So that's me.
Oh.
No, that is true. I think it's Meno, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Meno.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're not at, Anytus hasn't appeared yet,
Okay.
or Anytus.
So these opinions were in him, were they not?
Yes.
So the man who does not know has within himself true opinions about the things that he does not know.
So it appears.
These opinions have now just been stirred up like a dream, but if he were repeatedly asked these same questions in various ways, you know that in the end his knowledge about these things would be as accurate as anyone's.
It is likely.
And he will know it without having been taught, but only questioned, and find the knowledge within himself.
Yes.
And is not finding knowledge within oneself recollection?
Certainly.
Must he not either have at some time acquired the knowledge he now possesses, or else have always possessed it?
Yes.
If he had always had it, he would always have known. If he acquired it, he cannot have done so in his present life. Or has someone taught him geometry? for he will perform in the same way about all geometry and all other knowledge. Has someone taught him everything? You should know, especially as he has been born and brought up in your house.
But I know that no one has taught him.
Yet he has these opinions, or doesn't he?
That seems indisputable, Socrates.
If he has not acquired them in his present life, is it not clear that he had learned them, had learned them at some other time?
It seems so.
Then that was the time when he was not a human being?
Yes.
If then, during the time he exists and is not a human being, he will have true opinions which, when stirred by questioning, become knowledge, will not his soul have learned during all this time? For it is clear that during all time he exists, either as a man or not.
So it seems.
Then, if the truth about reality is always in our soul, the soul would be immortal, so that you should always confidently try to seek out and recollect what you do not know at present. That is, what you do not recollect.
Somehow, Socrates, I think that what you say is right.
I think so too, Meno. I do not insist that my argument is right in all other respects, but I would contend at all costs, both in word and deed, as far as I could, that we will be better men, braver and less idle, if we believe that one must search for the things one does not know, rather than if we believe that it is not possible to find out what we do not know and that we must not look for it.
Okay, let's stop there for a moment to see if you have any comments or questions. This is pretty hard stuff to take, isn't it?
I like it.
It seems strange to me.
It sounds like a trait psychologist. You know,
Yeah.
99% of the psychologists, and I've never taken a class in psychology or anything, but anyhow, 99% of them I understand are behaviorists. In other words, partial reinforcement. You're rewarded for your virtuous behavior or whatever, or type of virtuous behavior. And the trait psychologist says not so. That there are certain traits. There's only like 1% of these people. One of the most famous is a guy named Robert Hogan. But anyhow, their theory is you take in among the animal kingdom, a small animal upon birth doesn't have time to be rewarded like a fawn being born, doesn't have time after it's born, it immediately gets quiet as danger approaches. And it's not because the mother has a chance to give it a little berry for reinforcement. There's something innate, something spontaneous. And so trait psychologists talk about these, and they describe different types of traits of virtue or morality.
Okay,
as
now
being like
let me interrupt you, Ernie, if I may.
Right.
So how is that relevant to this search for virtue?
Because he's talking about opinion as being inherent. And the trait
No, it's talking
psychologist
about knowledge as being inherent.
knowledge being inherent. And some of this is the same thing in trait psychology, I think. I don't know. I'm not a trait psychologist, but it sounds like it.
This is where I really disagree with Socrates,
Yes.
because I think what he's doing here is playing tricks with words. He's talking about learning, and then he talks about the slave and how he couldn't have known this beforehand, and yet he leads him through a whole process of Socratic teaching. What he's doing by asking questions is what we call the Socratic method of teaching.
Yeah.
So he gets him to think about the problem in a way that leads him to the conclusions. So that is teaching. I mean, he in one point, he's talking about teaching as if it's lectures. And then he completely ignores the fact that a lot of learning is not lecture. A lot of learning is by example or by what we call Socratic method.
Yeah, none of what he's doing, he says, is lecturing.
But
Right.
he's
The only thing that he does in way of lecturing it is calling that line a diagonal, or what I call the hypotenuse.
Right. But what I'm saying is that he's then making the claim that no teaching took place. And therefore, he had to know this ahead of time. And what I'm saying is that no, the teaching took place when Socrates used the Socratic method to lead the slave through this process of geometry to lead him to the answer. And so his argument falls apart to say that we can't learn something because there are no teachers. He's the teacher. He just isn't a lecturer.
Lucy?
I'm coming at this from a different viewpoint, I think. And I don't think the slave did. I think, if I recall, the slave did not understand that even after his long explanation. I think that's the slave still didn't really get that. But what I like about this,
he had what Socrates called, he had no true opinion, but unless he really practiced, it would become knowledge.
well, yeah, right. But what I like is him talking about how we know things that we don't know, because, where he says in this part, I don't know if I can find it now, that that we were someone, we knew something before we were human. So we were our soul lives on, and what our soul learned before we became human. So he's talking about what passes on through the soul to the person is something that you can't find if you don't look for it. If you don't try to find that, you won't find that. I don't know. I like him talking about that we know stuff that we don't know, and how we try to find that. Yeah, that's
Forrest,
Go ahead, Eva.
yes, Forrest, what this called to mind for me,
Excuse me. Go ahead.
what this called to mind for me was the Faber College motto that appeared in the 1970s movie Animal House. The motto was "Knowledge is good," and that seemed to me to be what Socrates was trying to say at some point in this dialogue.
Yeah.
Knowledge is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I kind of take issue with his, and I guess it would be 86A, where he says, if he hadn't acquired in the present, and then he says, then there was that time when he was not a human being.
Yeah.
And, well, wait a second. He's got this guy going, yes, I agree. And then all of a sudden he pops up with this question like, wait a second. Now we have to define what is a human being and what is not a human being. And what does that mean? It seems like he's kind of getting this yes man to say yes, without really even thinking about the question. So he doesn't define what a human being or not a human being is. So I'm not sure, for him to start talking about what it is to not be a human being and what a soul is, brings open a whole nother, something worth of another Ph.D. dissertation. So he just kind of throws that out like, okay, as I'm going along, is this okay? Sort of dragging the person into something. And I agree with, I don't know who it was, the speaker that said before that he seems to me to be a little sneaky, like he'll just keep going and see how much he can get away with and get people to agree to.
Yeah, what Paul said.
Yeah.
Bill, you wanted to say.
Oh, I agree with everything that everybody's saying. I think he brings up the word soul so easily, and yet soul is a much more complicated concept to me than virtue is.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Charlie?
I think the passage that Eva pointed to is the point where he slipped away from it because I thought he was trying to make a jump that wasn't necessarily required when he said, but if he did not acquire the knowledge in this life, then he must have learned it at some other time. And Meno says clearly he must, etc. And so he jumps to the conclusion that it's pre-birth type thing. It's in the soul or whatever. And I think his language says, but if he did not acquire the language in this life, then he must have learned it at some other time. But it seems to me that he could have not been born with it, but immediately began to learn it as an infant at his mother's breast. That is, behavior was approved or disapproved from day one. And he misses that connection, which could be something that is learned behavior, that he comes to the knowledge of what is virtuous from a early point in life and not before.
But the slave boy beforehand didn't know the answer. And then with appropriate questioning, he does arrive at the answer. And he gets to something which, if he weren't really practiced, he would have knowledge which he didn't have before. He didn't have it just when he was born, right?
But you don't have
Otherwise,
anything.
He could have answered right away. Oh, Socrates, all you do is build a square on the diagonal.
Don't go there, please.
But isn't that exactly what Socrates is saying, is that he did have it somehow. He had to recollect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
a contradiction. It seems contradictory to me.
Right.
Caroline, yes.
So is he introducing the whole concept then of reincarnation?
Seems to be
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like, which was in the air. There was another thinker called Pythagoras who believed in that. So that was a notion that was available. I'd like to just point to the very last thing Socrates said before I interrupted. I think so, Meno. I do not insist that my argument is right in all other respects, but I would say it's better for us to believe this. We will be braver, we will be better people if we think that we can find knowledge than if we don't. So that gives Socrates a kind of out for me to say, well, I'm telling this story, but that might not be the whole way to do it. So I'm giving him a little bit more credit than Paul is.
Yes, you are.
Okay, well, let's pick it up from there.
I think Holly had a question.
Oh,
Yeah,
excuse me, Holly.
just a general comment. I feel like he is driving every conversation to the point of perplexity.
Yeah. Yes.
As we read him as the people engaged in the dialogue, that kind of the general point of our need for great humility, as Eva said, about what we know and what we don't know, just kind of the limits of all that.
Yeah.
He brings up the sophist later, and I found myself thinking he is a sophist.
Yeah.
Oh, the sophists were famous for giving lectures. That's all that they did. And they became, as Socrates says, some of them became very, very wealthy. Gorgias was a wealthy person, and Protagoras too. They had a lot of followers, but they charged for their teaching, which Socrates never did for his sort of teaching.
But doesn't sophistry mean you clever with words and
Yes, it does.
Playing with. Yeah,
but Socrates seemed to be upset by the fact that the sophists said they could teach virtue, and he obviously not of the opinion that virtue could be taught in that fashion. He liked Gorgias because apparently Gorgias didn't make that representation that he could teach virtue.
Yeah.
Well, here's another problem.
Gorgias a little bit of an out there.
Yeah.
Supposedly, the sophists came to Athens to teach rhetoric. That was their claim to fame, and because rhetoric then became very, very valuable if you had to go to court. Okay, let's pick up Meno. In that too, I think you are right.
In this too, I think you are right, Socrates.
Since we are of one mind that one should seek to find out what one does not know, shall we try to find out together what virtue is?
Certainly. But Socrates, I should be most pleased to investigate and hear your answer to my original question, whether we should try on the assumption that virtue is something teachable or is a natural gift, or in whatever way it comes to men.
If I were directing you, Meno, and not only myself, we would not have investigated whether virtue is teachable or not before we had investigated what virtue itself is. But because you do not even attempt to rule yourself in order that you may be free, but you try to rule me and do so, I will agree with you, for what can I do? So we must, it appears, inquire into the qualities of something, the nature of which we do not yet know. However, please relax your rule a little bit for me and agree to investigate whether it is teachable or not by means of a hypothesis. I mean the way geometers often carry on their investigations. For example, if they are asked together whether a specific area can be inscribed in the form of a triangle within a given circle, one of them might say, I do not yet know whether that area has that property, but I think I have, as it were, a hypothesis that is of use for the problem, namely this: if that area is such that when one has applied it as a rectangle to the given straight line in the circle, it is deficient by a figure similar to the very figure which it is applied. Then I think one alternative results, whereas another results if it is impossible for this to happen. So by using this hypothesis, I am willing to tell you what results with regard to inscribing it in the circle. That is, whether it is impossible or not. So let us speak about virtue also, since we do not know either what it is or what qualities it possesses, and let us investigate whether it is teachable or not by means of a hypothesis, and say this: among the things existing in the soul, of what sort is virtue, that it should be teachable or not? First, if it is another sort than knowledge, is it teachable or not? As we were just saying, recollectible. Let it make no difference to us which term we use. Is it teachable, or is it plain to anyone that men cannot be taught anything but knowledge?
I think so.
Excuse me, what translation are you using, Eva?
It's GMA Grube.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
All right.
Okay, mine is different, but I've got an old copy that I'm using. So you all followed what Eva was saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Followed mine.
Good.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, whoever made the newer edition has obviously made some changes. So, okay. I'm sorry.
All right. But if virtue is a kind of knowledge, it is clear that it could be taught.
Of course.
We have dealt with that question quickly, that if it is of one kind, it can be taught. If it is of a different kind, it cannot.
We have indeed.
The next point to consider seems to be whether virtue is knowledge or something else.
That does seem to be the very next point to consider.
Well now, do we say that virtue is itself something good? And will this hypothesis stand firm for us that it is something good?
Of course.
If then there's anything else good that is different and separate from knowledge, virtue might well not be a kind of knowledge. But if there is nothing good that knowledge does not encompass, we would be right to suspect that it is a kind of knowledge.
That is so.
Surely virtue makes us good,
Yes.
and if we are good, we are beneficent, for all that is good is beneficial. Is that not so?
Yes.
So virtue is something beneficial.
That necessarily follows from what has been agreed.
Let us then examine what kinds of things benefit us, taking them up one by one. Health, we say, and strength, and beauty, and also wealth. We say that these things and others of the same kind benefit us, do we not?
We do.
Yet we say that these same things are also sometimes harm one. Do you agree or not?
I do.
Look then what directing factor determines in each case whether these things benefit or harm us. Is it not the right use of them that benefits us and the wrong use that harms us?
Certainly.
Let us now look at the qualities of the soul. There is something you call moderation and justice, courage, intelligence, memory, munificence, and all such things.
There is.
Consider whichever of these you believe not to be knowledge, but different from it. Do they not at times harm us, at other times benefit us? Courage, for example, when it is not wisdom, but like a kind of recklessness, When a man is reckless without understanding, he is harmed. When with understanding, he is benefited.
Yes.
The same is true of moderation and mental quickness. When they are learned and disciplined with understanding, they are beneficial, but without understanding, they are harmful.
Very much so.
Therefore, in a word, all that the soul undertakes and endures, if directed by wisdom, ends in happiness. But if directed by ignorance, it ends in the opposite.
That is likely.
If then virtue is something in the soul and it must be beneficial, it must be knowledge, since all the qualities of the soul are in themselves neither beneficial nor harmful, but accompanied by wisdom or folly, they become harmful or beneficial. This argument shows that virtue, being beneficial, must be a kind of wisdom.
Okay, can we stop there and see what comments are?
But I have a line to read.
Oh, sorry. We'll get back to you.
Oh, okay.
We'll open up the curtain again.
My moment of fame.
Well, do you have any questions or comments about the way Socrates leads Meno? Holly?
Does he exclude virtue as behavior rather than bent of mind? I always think of virtue as behavior. I don't. That's not apropos of what he said or anything, but
Okay. But isn't that encompassed then that there is a kind of behavior that can be very reckless, courageous but reckless, or wealthy but misusing it, spending it on the wrong kinds of things?
You got the message from Wanda about coffee?
I don't know. I think if it's behavior, you can
go in his place.
take whether it's
I'll have to think that.
it can be judged in a different way than bent of mind.
Oh, okay. Lucy?
Yeah, his big explanation with the geometry and fitting the triangle and the rectangle inside the circle is, I can draw a line from that to where he begins to talk about virtue as being, in this something in the soul, and it must be beneficial, it must be knowledge, and all of those characteristics can be good or bad. So it's like he's trying to fit these things inside of his definition of virtue, like he's trying to fit the triangle inside the circle. So I don't know. That I just drew a parallel there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And trying to get us to think of virtue as a kind of knowledge, of a particular kind of knowledge, which would reveal itself in behavior, as Holly suggests.
Yeah.
Or not.
Eva?
Yeah, I think
Or
I
not.
agree with Molly, and I think he kind of supports that, because he says if virtue is a kind of knowledge, it is clear that it could be taught, and either taught by a person or taught by life experiences. Our behavior is in response to things around us. So I think he is saying that it is knowledge, and knowledge is taught or through experience or through direct teaching. So so he's not really trying, in my opinion, to really define knowledge. He just sort of says that it's something good, that it is knowledge, that it can be taught, but how you apply it then is what's important. So if anything, he seems to be leaning towards the fact that it is something, in my opinion, not something that's sort of de novo that you pop out with, but that it is something that is learned.
Yes, Paul?
I think that he later will say that it isn't learned, that it is something that is innate. But I also think that part of his problem is that he doesn't understand the way words are used in language. In other words, he makes a claim, words like virtue, words like excellence, words like knowledge, they're abstractions. There are things that don't exist in the real world. I mean, we can't touch them. We can't feel them. They aren't like chairs or tables or whatever.
Right.
And so when he says that, oh, well, when you add multiple definitions to a word, you know, when he tries to when Meno tries to define virtue at the beginning, and he says, no, I only want one definition. That doesn't work with abstractions, because abstractions aren't real things. They aren't concrete things. That's how Plato comes up with his idea of forms, where he thinks that there's a real thing somewhere that is the essence of chair, for example. You know, and all other things are copies of this. Well, you have to make that conclusion if you think that abstractions are real things, but you don't have to make that distinction, and you don't have to do that with knowledge, and you don't have to do it with virtue. For example, one of the translations of virtue was the word was arete, which can be either excellence or morality, but in reality, it's both. If it isn't both, then it isn't really what we would call virtue. You know, if you take the morality out of virtue, it doesn't mean anything, and if you take the excellence out of virtue, it doesn't mean anything. So his whole theory, his whole approach, is a little underhanded in dealing with Meno, because you know that's not the way the world is. Abstractions are not concrete things.
I'm not quite following you, Paul.
Okay. Well, let me try it one more time. Okay. He's trying to define virtue.
Well, no, at this point, he's saying, well, we cannot, you know, you've given up, and now you have gone back to your original question, is whether virtue is teachable. And he said, okay, you know, I'll go along with you then for this next part of our discussion, and we'll proceed by hypothesis. So he's not dealing with the question of what virtue is at this point.
Right. No, I when I listened to the last episode, our last discussion, you know, I thought that was unfair of Socrates to have limited Meno to just one definition of virtue, because it doesn't have just one definition. But okay.
Why do you think it doesn't have only one definition?
Because virtue means both excellence and morality, for example. And so you can't just say, oh, it means excellence, or oh, it means morality, or oh, it means courage, or oh, it means, you know, it means all those things.
Oh.
So those could be types,
that is the definition
of virtue.
Right. That is the definition of virtue. There are words we call categoricals, which are names of categories. Well, how do you define a category unless you start listing things that fall into that category? And virtue is almost a categorical.
Well, then how do you define a word with a word?
You look at the dictionary, and some words have 56 different definitions.
Right. Yeah. And so, and even the dictionaries that we've looked up in, we've gotten all these different definitions. But Socrates says again and again, but I'm not asking for a whole bunch of them. I'm asking for one true definition. Like a one true definition of a triangle is a three-sided figure with whose angles add up to 180 degrees or something like that.
Yes, but there's his confusion. A triangle is a concrete thing. We can see a triangle with our eyes. Okay, we can draw it with our hands. It's
a drawn triangle. That's true of a drawn triangle, but not of the definition of a triangle.
It's still more concrete than virtue.
Okay. Okay, we'll come back. Let's proceed with where we are.
That's good.
Hang in there, Paul.
I'm coming.
That's good.
So now I get to read my line.
Yes.
I agree.
Oh, I'm so sorry that we cut you off.
Yeah, I thought I did it really well too.
Okay, Socrates.
Okay, so one may say this is about everything. All other human activities depend on the soul, and those of the soul itself depend on wisdom if they are to be good. According to this argument, the beneficial would be wisdom, and we say that virtue is beneficial.
Certainly.
Virtue, then, as a whole or in part, is wisdom.
What you say, Socrates, seems to me quite right.
Then, if that is so, the good are not so by nature.
I do not think they are.
For if they were, this would follow. If the good were so by nature, we would have people who knew which among the young were by nature good. We would take those whom they have pointed out and guard them in the Acropolis, sealing them up there much more carefully than gold, so that no one could corrupt them. And when they reached maturity, they would be useful to their cities.
Reasonable enough, Socrates.
Since the good are not good by nature, does learning make them so?
Necessarily, I now think, Socrates, and clearly on our hypothesis, if virtue is knowledge, it can be taught.
Perhaps by Zeus, but it may that we were not right to agree to this.
Yet it seemed to be right at the time.
We should not only think it right at the time, but also now and in the future, if it is to be at all sound.
What is the difficulty? What do you have in mind that you do not like about it and doubt that virtue is knowledge?
I will tell you, Meno, I am not saying that it is wrong to say that virtue is teachable if it is knowledge, but look whether it is reasonable of me to doubt whether it is knowledge. Tell me this, if not only virtue, but anything whatever can be taught, should there not be of necessity people who teach it and people who learn it?
I think so.
Then again, if on the contrary there are no teachers or learners of something, should we be right to assume that the subject cannot be taught?
Quite so. But you think that there are no teachers of virtue?
I've often tried to
Excuse
find
me,
out.
let me leap in here. Do you see anything wrong with what Socrates has
Yeah.
just said?
Yeah, this is a terrible argument.
Mike, what would you say?
Well, I mean, to say that because there are no teachers, there is not there is no knowledge, or it doesn't exist.
No, it can't be, because there are no teachers, it can't be taught.
Right. I mean, that's a terrible statement. I mean,
Why?
well, because the fact that there are empirically no teachers could be an economic issue. Even in Athens, it could be, hey, I'm not earning any money by going out and teaching virtue. I earn my money by going out and teaching rhetoric. If they all did that, that doesn't mean that, you know what, it's almost a marketplace.
I was thinking about if there's nobody teaching people how to fly, then teaching people how to fly can't be taught. It can't be taught.
Right, which, you know, 200 years ago was true. There were no people teaching people how to fly.
There's so many teachers it isn't even funny. I mean, the parents are teachers, and everybody's a teacher.
Yeah, nowadays.
So there's a lot of slipperiness here that goes on with Socrates. It's no wonder that some of you are ready to kind of notice that.
I'm going to give him hemlock.
Out of exasperation.
Okay.
He's not
Socrates.
he's not really saying it can't be learned. He's saying it can't.
Can't
So that's a very different matter. And
okay.
My question is, how much of virtue is spontaneous? Sometimes people react by saying immediately, without thinking, just, I wouldn't do that, like throw a cat off a high building, or to do unwarranted injury to another person, such as murder. How much of that is spontaneous? I mean, on the moment. I'm not saying it's not learned, I'm just saying spontaneous reaction. And it's carried through the ages and through other cultures. How much of that is simply spontaneous? I don't know, but
I would think some of those things are a result of good parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go on. Socrates.
I have often
I-
tried to find out.
Okay.
I have often tried to find out whether there were any teachers of it, but in spite of all my efforts, I cannot find any. And yet I have searched for them with the help of many people, especially those whom I believe to be most experienced in this matter. And now, Meno, Anytus here has opportunely come to sit. Oh, and now, Meno, Anytus here has opportunely come to sit by us. Let us share our search with him. It would be reasonable for us to do so, for Anytus, in the first place, is the son of Anthemion, a man of wealth and wisdom, who did not become rich automatically or as a result of a gift like Ismenias the Theban, who recently acquired the possessions of Polycrates, but through his own wisdom and efforts. Further, he did not seem to be an arrogant or puffed up or offensive citizen in other ways, but he was a well-mannered and well-behaved man. Also, he gave our friend here a good upbringing and education, as the majority of Athenians believe, for they are electing him to the highest offices. It is right then to look for the teachers of virtue with the help of men such as he, whether there are any, and if so, who they are. Therefore, Anytus, please join me and your guest friend Meno here in our inquiry as to who are the teachers of virtue. Look at it this way. If we wanted Meno to become a good physician, to what teachers would we send him? Would we not send him to the physicians?
Anytus? Lucy?
Certainly is Anytus?
Yeah.
Okay, that's him. Okay,
That's
certainly.
And if we wanted him
Sure.
to be a shoemaker, to shoemakers?
Yes,
And so with other pursuits.
certainly.
Tell me again on this same topic like this. We say that we would be right to send him to the physicians if we want him to become a physician. Whenever we say that, we mean that it would be reasonable to send him to those who practice the craft rather than to those who do not, and to those who exact fees for this very practice and have shown themselves to be teachers of anyone who wishes to come to them and learn. Is it not with this in mind that we would be right to send him?
Yes.
And the same is true about flute playing and the other crafts. It would be very foolish for those who want to make someone a flute player to refuse to send him to those who profess to teach the craft and make money at it, but to send him to make trouble for others by seeking to learn from those who do not claim to be teachers or have a single pupil in that subject, which we want the one we sent to learn from them. Do you not think it very unreasonable to do so?
By Zeus, I do, and also very ignorant.
Oh, are you overacting?
Me? I'm just trying to. I'm trying to put myself there.
Yes. You're trying to make the most of your
Should I
part.
not do? Should I not do that? Because
No, it's wonderful.
I think that used to be called method acting.
Yes.
okay, then. I'm not an actor, but I'm listening, and this is what comes out. So.
Okay, Socrates, quite right.
Okay, quite right. However, you can now deliberate with me about our guest friend Meno here. He has been telling me for some time, Anytus, that he longs to acquire that wisdom and virtue which enables men to manage their household and their cities as well, to take care of their parents, to know how to welcome and to send away both citizens and strangers as a good man should. Consider to whom we should be right to send him to learn this virtue. Or is it obvious, in view of what we just said now, that we should send him to those who profess to be teachers of virtue and have shown themselves to be available to any Greek who wishes to learn, and for this fix a fee and exact it?
And who do you say these are, Socrates?
You surely know yourself that they are those whom men call sophists.
By Hercules, hush, Socrates. May no one of my household or friends, whether citizen or stranger, be mad enough to go to these people and be harmed by them, for they clearly cause the ruin and corruption of their followers.
How do you mean, Anytus? Are these people alone of those who claim the knowledge to benefit one so different from the others that they not only do not benefit when one entrusts to them, but on the contrary corrupt it, even though they obviously expect to make money from the process? I find I cannot believe you, for I know that one man, Protagoras,
Protagoras.
made more money from this knowledge of his than Phidias, who made such notably fine works, and 10 other sculptors. Surely what you say is extraordinary if those who mend old sandals and restore clothes would be found out within the month if they returned all the clothes and sandals in a worse state than they had received them. If they did this, they would soon die of starvation. But the whole of Greece has not noticed for 40 years that Protagoras corrupts those who frequent him and sends them away in a worse moral condition than he received them. I believe that he was nearly 70 when he died and had practiced his craft for 40 years. During all that time to this very day, his reputation has stood high. And not only Protagoras, but a great many others, some born before him and some still alive today. Are we to say that you maintain that they deceive and harm the young knowingly, or that they themselves are not aware of it? Are we to deem those whom people consider the wisest of men to be so mad as that?
They are far from being mad, Socrates. It is much rather those among the young who pay their fees who are mad, and even more the relatives who entrust their young to them, and most of all the cities who allow them to come in and do not drive out any citizens or stranger who attempts to behave in this manner.
Has some sophist wronged you, Anytus, or why are you so hard upon them?
No, by Zeus, I have never met one of them, nor would I allow any one of my people to do so.
Are you then altogether without any experience of these men?
And may I remain so.
How then, my good sir, can you know whether there is any good in their instruction or not, if you are altogether without experience of it?
Easily, for I know who they are, whether I have experienced them or not.
Perhaps you are a wizard, Anytus, for I wonder, from what you yourself say, how else you know about these things. However, let us not try to find out who the men are whose company would make Meno wicked. Let them be the sophists, if you like, but tell us, and benefit your family friend here, by telling him to whom he should go in so large a city to acquire, to any worthwhile degree, the virtue I was just now describing.
Why did you not tell him yourself?
I did mention those whom I thought to be teachers of it, but you say I am wrong, and perhaps you are right. You tell him in your turn to whom among the Athenians he should go. Tell him the name of anyone you want.
Why give him the name of one individual? Any Athenian gentleman he may meet, if he is willing to be persuaded, will make him a better man than the sophists would.
And have these gentlemen become virtuous automatically, without learning from anyone? And are they able to teach others what they themselves never learned?
I believe that these men have learned from those who were gentlemen before them. Or do you not think that there are many good men in this city?
I believe, Anytus, that there are many men here who are good at public affairs, and that there have been as many in the past. But have they been good teachers of their own virtue? That is the point we are discussing, not whether there are good men here or not, or whether there have been in the past. But we have been investigating for some time whether virtue can be taught. And in the course of that investigation, we are inquiring whether the good men of today and of the past knew how to pass on to one another the virtue they themselves possessed, or whether a man cannot pass it on or receive it from another. This is what Meno and I have been investigating for some time. Look at it this way, from what you yourself had said. Would you not say that Themistocles was a good man?
Yes, even the best of men.
And therefore a good teacher of his own virtue, if anyone was?
I think so, if he wanted to be.
But do you think he did not want some other people to be worthy men, and especially his own son? Or do you think he begrudged him this and deliberately did not pass on to him his own virtue? Have you not heard that Themistocles taught his son Cleophantus? Did I say that right?
That's okay.
Okay. Cleophantus, all right, whatever. To be a good horseman, He could remain standing upright on horseback and shoot javelins from that position and do many other remarkable things which his father had him taught and made skillful at, all of which required good teachers. Have you not heard this from your elders?
I have.
So no one could not blame the poor natural talents of the son for his failure in virtue.
Perhaps not.
But have you heard anyone, young or old, say that Cleophantus, the son of Themistocles, was a good and wise man at the same pursuits as his father?
Never.
Are we to believe that he wanted to educate his son in those other things, but not to do better than his neighbors in that skill which he himself possessed, if indeed virtue can be taught?
Perhaps not, by Zeus.
And yet he was, as you yourself agree, among the best teachers of virtue in the past. Let us consider another man, Aristides, the son of Lysimachus. Do you not agree that he was good?
I very definitely do.
He too gave his own son Lysimachus the best Athenian education in matters which are the business of teachers. And you think he made him a better man than anyone else? For you have been in his company and seen the kind of man he is. Or take Pericles, a man of such magnificent wisdom. You know that he brought up two sons, Paralus and Xanthippus.
I know.
You also know that he taught them to be as good horsemen as any Athenian, that he educated them in the arts, in gymnastics, and in all else that was a matter of skill, not to be inferior to anyone. But did he not want to make them good men? I think he did, but this could not be taught. And lest you think that only a few most inferior Athenians are capable in this respect, reflect that Thucydides too brought up two sons, Melesius and Stephanus, and that he educated them well in all things. They were the best wrestlers in Athens. He entrusted the one to Xanthias and the other to Eudorus, who were thought to be the best wrestlers of the day. Or do you not remember?
I remember. I have heard that said.
It is surely clear he would not have taught his boys what it costs money to teach, but have failed to teach them what costs nothing, making them good men, if that could be taught. Or was Thucydides perhaps an inferior person, who had not many friends among the Athenians and the allies? He belonged to a great house, he had great influence in the city and among the other Greeks, so that virtue could be taught. He would have found the man who could have made his sons a good men, be it a citizen or a stranger. But if he himself did not have the time because of public concerns. But friend Anytus, virtue can certainly not be taught.
I think, Socrates, that you easily speak ill of people. I would advise you, if you will listen to me, to be careful. Perhaps also in another city, and certainly here, it is easier to injure people than to benefit them. I think you know that yourself.
Okay, let me interrupt here. So
Yeah.
Anytus at this point gets up and leaves. We don't see him anymore. And these are all real people that Socrates is talking about, actual people. So what do you think of all this argument that's been going on here?
I think it's terrible.
It is
You know, it's there.
a terrible argument.
There is a logical fallacy called ad hominem, which means rather than deal with the issue, you deal with the individual. And you say, Jack can't be right because Jack is a thief, regardless of what Jack may be saying. So this whole thing is argument ad hominem. He's looking at people. He's saying, what do you think of their behavior? And he's using that to go back to the ethical issue of virtue. Well, the people's behavior is irrelevant to the ethical issue of virtue. So to me, this whole section is an ad hominem argument at going after people. And of course, Anytus, says that a little bit, but it has nothing to do with the nature of virtue.
I agree with that, but it called Anytus's advice to Socrates called to mind Burr's advice to Hamilton. In Hamilton, which he says, "Talk less, smile more."
Yeah.
Don't let people know what you're against or what you're for. And
Yeah.
that would probably have been good advice to poor Socrates, who seemed to have a bit of a death wish.
Well, and of course, some of you took my course on the trial and death of Socrates. Those of you who did know that Anytus was one of the three guys who indicted Socrates and brought him to trial and eventually to his execution by drinking hemlock. So Anytus is no friend of Socrates, though Socrates treats him quite politely here. But there is this drama that is going on that you know about if you know some of these other things.
In a way
But
too.
going back, what's wrong with Mike says that this is all terrible ad hominem stuff, but Socrates is simply saying, look, here are these people who you say are good guys, but then their kids turn out to be we only talk about men and women, not women, but these boys turn out to be not so good. They're good at javelin throwing and horseback riding and so on, but some of them are pretty crummy people, even though they have very good parents.
Oh, my kids are great kids and proved I'm a great parent.
Bill, you wanted to say.
Well, this is one place where, while I'm not sure that it's at all logical, the argument that Socrates is making,
Right.
I do find it very human and interesting in that
Right.
we all sort of look around us at people we've known who were really fine human beings, and their children turned out poorly, and we don't understand. It's a mystery.
Well,
so it is interesting.
I agree exactly what you're saying, Bill. How many have known parents that have been super good parents and taught the children against doing certain things all their lives, and yet when they get among the peers, when they're teenagers, in 5 or 10 minutes, those kids will indulge in just that behavior. I mean, so the peers actually have a stronger influence sometimes, but that's mentioned about the company that like Themistocles' son was keeping and so on. So
On the other hand, how did the parents become such good people?
Are they?
Well, by
Were they
what Ernie said, he was suggesting that there are good people who are parents who have awful kids, and I'm questioning. Well, how did those parents become good? Did they have good parents too, or can there be good kids who had crummy parents?
I think often they have very good peers. I think parents have to choose their peers very carefully because peers have such an enormous influence, and you can see it over and over again. The people of cloth, religious people, and people in law enforcement, professionals, raise these children, and by example and by other means, and yet they get in a party for 10 minutes and they can do the exact behaviors that the parents have by example and by instruction have taught them against all their lives.
Okay,
Some survive that. Many survive that or learn from it.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because I want us to go back to the dialogue.
Right. Okay. But anyhow, that's what I was just trying to reinforce what Bill was saying.
Okay.
But in the dialogue itself, Themistocles' son, of course, Themistocles was kicked out of Athens and ended up on the Persian side along with his son and became formidable. But the others, I don't know, was so bad. Pericles' son became orators. But, some of that argument of Socrates, I don't know how good it is, but I mean,
Caroline?
Well, I just wonder, doesn't this take us back to the conversation about soulfulness and how virtue is? I mean, we go back to that soulful conversation and the essence of virtue, and that it's not clearly defined. I mean, at the end of reading all this, that's why I, in exasperation, after I thought about it, had to look it up because I was so confused. But it's that soulfulness quality that you really can't define, kind of like wisdom. And so
Yeah.
I feel like that's leading us back to the conversation we had just a little bit ago about the soulfulness of virtue.
I'd like to point out, go ahead, Paul.
But Socrates takes it even further, because what he says is that not only do these parents have children that didn't turn out to be virtuous, but he therefore makes the claim that therefore virtue can't be taught. Anyone who's ever taught a class knows that in any class there are kids who get it and who learn, and there are kids who don't get it and don't learn. And it isn't necessarily the fault of the teacher if there are one or two kids who don't get it, who choose not to learn. And so his argument falls apart at that point, because you can't make the statement that because some people didn't learn, that no learning takes place and therefore it can't be taught.
I'd like to raise a point for you about Socrates' analogy. He makes these analogies about a physician. If you want somebody to become a physician, who do you do? What do? You send them to medical school, or in his day, you send them to a physician who will then teach him the skills that are needed for being a physician. If you want somebody to become a shoemaker, you send them to a shoemaker to learn how to be a shoemaker. Now, I'd like to point out to you that this is a different kind of knowledge.
Yes,
This is
exactly.
kind of knowledge which we call the knowledge of how to do something, the knowledge of how to ride a bicycle. You know, you can teach people. Most of you, or some of you, might have taught your children or your grandchildren. You can teach somebody how to fly an airplane. But is teaching somebody how to do something anything like teaching virtue? It seems like a whole different ballgame.
Yes, but it's still teaching.
But it's not these analogies, right, are skill-based teaching. He doesn't address in these the issue of teaching people how to think on their own, how to make decisions on their own, how to be creative. There's a lot of teaching going on that is teaching people how to think and teaching people how to make their own decisions in life, and in that way it becomes creative. You know, that's how you teach somebody mathematics and they can figure out how to fly or how to build an airplane. And he kind of ignores all that. And then he goes back to the ad hominem argument. So, well, who would you send your person to learn virtue? Well, you send them to the sophists. Well, the sophists are bad guys. But why not send them to a good philosopher who isn't a bad guy? He's kind of slipping back, in my mind, into these ad hominem cases of you criticize the people and therefore you can deduce that their positions are wrong.
Okay, but I was raising the question about the how-to, the knowledge how-to, how whether this is relevant. Paul?
Yeah, well, he opens himself to a charge of hypocrisy or two, because when Socrates is brought to trial, one of the main reasons is because he was the teacher of Alcibiades, who was to Athens what Benedict Arnold was to the United States.
True.
And so, you know, I don't think it was fair to blame the teacher, because again, the argument that not all children learn equally or pick up the lessons that are being taught, but he's using that argument against Themistocles, etc., when it actually rebounds against him as well.
Well, we're talking about the Meno, though.
Okay.
Bill.
Yeah, well, you know, this does, in my mind at least, raise an interesting question when I think about it. If there was a child out there, you know, a wild child that hadn't been touched by anybody, and I wanted him or her to grow up to be virtuous, is there someone I could send that child to in our society today that I could depend upon to teach virtue? And I can't think of anyone that I could depend upon that for.
Right. Good question. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Lorraine. Oh, you're muted, Lorraine. Lorraine, you're muted.
We can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Now,
There you go.
now my dog was bothering me, so I turned me off.
Oh, okay.
Could he be leading us on as he did with the mathematical problem earlier, with as us for us to finally see at the end that it is a wrong method or a wrong assumption to make, that this is a way to acknowledge that with that at the end of it, that's the impression I got that this was a wasted part of getting the truth of what except to show that it didn't get you to that truth.
That you were kind of breaking up a bit, Lorraine. Can you say that at all again? That something wasn't coming through.
Well, is this also a more Socrates' method to show us things that don't work and lead us, and then at the end realize that it was a fruitless exploration, and knowledge is something else, virtue is something else, or transmitted in another way, not this.
Okay, yes, he does say, no, this isn't going to work, this isn't going to work, but he doesn't want to end up saying that this is fruitless, because he said in that passage way before this morning that we will be better people if we believe that we can search for knowledge. So it's for Socrates, it's not at all fruitless. All the attempts by Meno and Anytus turn out to be fruitless. But that doesn't mean that we should give up hope.
But isn't there a great deal of subjectivism in all of this? I mean, isn't like beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Isn't virtue in the eye of the beholder as well?
Well, but beauty isn't in the eye of the beholder.
Well, they say it is.
There, I've just immediately refuted you.
During the thought.
You can't go from one falsity to another, Lance.
Yeah, but you see, if in point of fact one is trying to teach virtue, if you were on the right wing of this country, you would say they are being groomed. They're not being taught virtue; they're being groomed, and that grooming is a very bad thing. They're learning to appreciate the differences in different people, and that everyone can love whoever they want to love. And we might think that's a virtue, but there are many who in this country who do not think that's a virtue at all.
Interesting that you use the word groom. Groom, I take it to groom somebody is not to help somebody to learn to do something. It's trying to get person to behave a certain way, not by choice, but you're kind of working on that person. You're kind of trying to program that person.
You're shaping them.
What Ernie was talking about before. Caroline, was that you?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying you're shaping them.
Yes.
I mean, you're shaping that person.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say and this is your prior class, Forrest, on the symposium where Socrates, love is real, and in the symposium, and I would say he thinks virtue is real. It's not in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah,
and that's an arguable point, but Socrates clearly believed that stuff was real.
Yes,
as well as beauty.
Yes. Yep.
And I think he might be leaning towards saying or thinking that virtue cannot be taught because, I mean, if it could, there'd be schools of virtue and we would all sign up and go there.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
and he's sort of making the point that, when he talks about the good man who has bad sons, well, how old are these sons, and how does he not know that those sons may become virtuous as they learn, through life's hard knocks or whatever you want to say. People do learn. That's how they learn. Mistakes are how we learn.
Yeah. Well, I think he's taking what he claims is sort of general knowledge about these people, that maybe the sons will change, but as far as we have seen them now, they seem to turn out to be a bad lot. But you're right, they might change, but how are they going to change? How are bad people going to become good people?
It happens all the time.
There's still hope for me.
Charlie, I think you've been wanting to say something for a while.
No, I'm trying to pictorialize the arguments back and forth. I'm finding it frustrating with just hanging on with Socrates' words as he bounces me around. I feel like I'm being yanked around. And so I've drawn a picture here.
That's great.
Anyway, up at the top is virtue, but virtue has a bunch of components. Courage,
Moderation,
wealth, beauty. I forget all the some of which are corruptible, can be bad. So here are all the components of virtue. He's tried to isolate them, and then we have coming in from the sides wisdom over here as an influence, and folly, because each component could be good or bad. And then we have down here, we have influences like parents and peers, and what else did I say? How-to teachers and books and experiences are influencing. And in the middle, around a dotted line, is my picture of behavior. Maybe you can't see that.
Yeah.
It's reversed. But so the behavior is query virtuous or not. And so I'm trying to figure out how I'm trying to manage Socrates' arguments for my own benefit, so that I can feel the power or impactfulness of the arguments, if you will. But I'm left in the end with the behavior has a dotted line around it, and you talk about beauty being perceived or not. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, query, yes, but in the end, time will judge as to whether somebody in fact persisted in his behavior or hers to be virtuous in some sense. And I mentioned at the beginning of the class that I looked at the Federalist Papers, where there are 23 explicit references to virtue, which are expounded upon, and frequently the word is coupled with wisdom. And I love that concept of whatever the manifestations of virtue are, they are in the end influenced by these twin forces of wisdom, which can make it good and beneficial, or folly, which can ruin the elements. So I think it takes the judgment of others to conclude whether or not the behavior is virtuous, and it takes time to build the argument that in fact it was real.
Very good. Excellent.
Dodie gave you a bit two hands and a thumbs up.
That's good.
I'd like to turn that around a little bit and I think that what's really important in this dialogue is the question of knowing. knowing something. Wisdom, yes, but in Socrates' vocabulary, and Socrates does use the word wisdom, but more often he talks about knowing. And I've just pointed out that we've just encountered with this encounter with Anytus, he gives the examples of knowing as a kind of how to do something, knowing how to do something. That doesn't seem to be the same knowing as knowing virtue. And he also asks Anytus, now, do you know about these guys? Now, that's another kind of knowing. And I think what I'd like to give you an assignment for next time, if you're willing to do this. I'd like you to figure out how many different senses of knowing does Plato, in writing this dialogue, how many different senses of knowing appear in this dialogue called the Meno? And I'd like you to kind of go back and wherever the word know pops up, see if that's a different kind of meaning of know than what's come before. And if you're willing, but this is not, and assignments are in this sort of course are freely offered and freely refused, if you want. So it's nothing that you have to do, but if this might turn out to be of some use, and then in between now and then, if you'd like to, you might share some of this with all of us. We all have each other's emails, and you can say, well, I have found 5 different meanings, or I've done 3 different meanings, or whatever. See if between now and then we can compile a list of the different meanings of know and the word know, and figure out which are most important to this pursuit that Socrates is engaged in.
Are we tying in the concept of effluvia in that forest?
That's a good, there's a whole nother one. Whole nother meaning. Pericles effluvia. Okay, if that's agreeable to you, let's pursue that, and then I'll figure out where we might pick up our reading. So we might do a little bit more of that, but then get back to that big question about what virtue is. Okay?
I just
So
want
do
to
you
say,
mean,
Yeah, Bill? Yeah.
I'm sorry, just want to say real quickly, I've got a staff meeting next Wednesday, so I may have to miss this. But I got to tell you, this has been this discussion today in particular has been really fascinating, and I hope I don't have to miss it. Thank you all very much.
Okay. Don't you have an assistant who can do that?
Yeah, I'll send my secretary.
Delegate.
Forrest,
Yeah.
do you mean when you say to look for the different meanings of the word know, meaning,
Yeah.
Are you looking for like knowledge, like, knowing as in wisdom, knowing, or just that word, those words?
Just that
No.
word. Just
Okay.
that word.
Got it.
Just that word.
And do you
No.
guarantee, are you guaranteeing a definition of virtue at the end?
I'm not promising anything, Lorraine. After all, I'm a volunteer. Okay, see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Eva, for reading all those hard words.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good job.
Do a good job.
Yep.
Take care.
Yeah, I want to thank Charles for his comments about the Federalist Papers. I don't have much to do with the academic world, but I was watching public TV once, Scalia was alive at the time, and he had the gathering of law students and at a law school. And he said, I remember he made this statement. He said, how many have read the Federalist Papers? And every hand went up. But of course, they meant like Federalist 10, Federalist 51. And then he said, and I'll never forget it, I mean, each and every one of them, not a hand went up of all those law students. And then he said this, you owe it to your future community, your future clients, to do just that. So I have never heard of anybody teaching a class in the Federalist. So thank you for doing that.
Well, just between us, I did teach the Federalist Papers 7 times at Georgetown.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
In the graduate liberal studies program there, and I got a degree in 2006. But I'd taken a course. Part of the hook, I mean, why would you at the age of 62 enroll at Georgetown in a graduate program?
Wow,
but that's
wonderful.
what I did. And the second class I took, the first one was de Tocqueville's Democracy in America.
Yeah.
We read both volumes. And
Right.
it was such an powerful experience for me. It was taught by Phyllis O'Callaghan, who was the dean of the program. And the second class that she taught was the Federalist Papers, called The Making of a Nation. So that was in 2003. Fast forward, after my degree and after teaching a couple things, I started teaching Phyllis O'Callaghan's class because she had retired. And the course was to read all the Federalist Papers, all 85 of them.
Right.
It's 585 pages, but we read another 585 pages of anti-Federalist papers.
Oh, okay.
And then the requirement that she imposed, and I continued out of respect and deference, was to write this long research paper, which was the sole grade, on some aspect of anti-federalism. Why? Because it was her theory you couldn't understand the making of the nation, so to speak, if you didn't understand the powerful pro-arguments of Madison, Jay, and Hamilton, the Federalist Papers, juxtaposed against the powerful arguments opposing a strong central government and all the lack of Bill of Rights and all the things that the anti-federalists did. That was a total awakening to me. And I went to law school. And anyway, her emphasis on appreciating not just the Federalist Papers, but the anti-Federalist Papers was life-altering to my mature self. And I love it. And so it's very, very helpful, much as I abhor much of what's going on the political scene of the current day.
Right.
I do have a deeper sympathy with positions I earnestly oppose, having appreciated all the arguments that the anti-federalists raised 200 years ago. And anyway, that's my backstory. And I agree with Scalia on that point, probably only. But
Okay.
I think it is and I did teach a little Chesapeake Forum class on the Federalist Papers. We read about 5 of them.
Okay.
And it's impossible to get to where Callahan wanted to go, which was to also read, 5 anti-federalist papers and so forth in a short form. But so it is a powerful fulcrum for understanding America still.
Good. Of course, I spent some time with Will Harris. I don't know if you know Will Harris or not.
I don't.
He does workshops at Montpelier, and you don't need to be a teacher or educator. I don't have any of that background. And you can just apply for them. I took 5 or 6 of them. And you stay at Montpelier. And Will Harris, I had one of the chairs at, I think he still teaches in Penn's Law School as emeritus. And, but before that, I think he taught at Princeton. And he was life-changing in his workshops. especially for the uninitiated, such as, I didn't know anything about that stuff. And I just applied. Someone told me to apply. And I said, "It'll take a waterman?" And he said, "He'll take anybody." And so I enrolled, and then I re-enrolled and re-enrolled. And so I have an appreciation, and then particularly for people like you. So I want to thank you publicly. I have a little forum I got to attend now. Right now, this time of year, crabbers fight over lays, and the question virtuous is, it came up yesterday, and of course they came to me, and the question was, here's a person who's extremely diabetic, very sick, and he's put his lines there, 15,000 feet, which is a lot, 5,000 foot lines, puts them in the same place for like 30 years, and a young guy comes in and takes it. Okay, he just has been there 2 days. Well, does he have a right to stay there, or should he give way to the old guy who's always been there? That whole discussion was really interesting.
Wow.
And it doesn't involve virtue, yeah. And of course, there's all these other side discussions. But anyhow, it really got, in fact, I need to go down there now and kind of see what's going on. But because the person is related to me. But anyhow, so it's.
Well, so
I
what's
want to
your
thank
role? What's your role in brokering that?
Oh, I guess because I worked on the water so long.
Yeah.
And I got involved simply because I tie up at the Waterman's Wharf. And, one person, then two people, then three people all bring up this discussion because we all know both parties.
Right.
And so it becomes a discussion of virtue. The young guy is a good guy. I had him get some line around my wheel one time, and he didn't want to charge me anything. Good guy, reasonable person. I think he can deal with. I don't think it needs to get to be, violence or anything. And the other guy is very experienced, very accomplished crabber, but very, he's in his 60s, but he's very sick, and he has severe limitations. I don't know how he even crabs. So, and everybody knows, everyone, including the young guy, knows that's where he usually works.
Wow.
And so it becomes, we'll see what happened today. They were all typical guys, I guess. They're all excited about, there ought to be a show tomorrow morning, meaning several hours ago now. So I'll go pick up the remnants of that, I guess. And
Well, good
hopefully,
luck. That's an unenviable task and a very natural local particularized problem.
oh, it is, believe me. I've been through it many, many times, both tonging and dredging and crabbing.
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, I'll go now. And my name isn't Christine. That's my wife's name.
No, it's
And,
Ernie.
it's her laptop. I don't have a laptop. So, but nice meeting you and talking with you. I'm glad to hear your background. That's inspiring. That's very inspiring.
All right. Well, great to talk. Thank you so much.
Okay.
This has been fun.
Okay.